You know, I want to start by saying something that might surprise you. If you're watching this, and I suspect many of you are watching because you're waking up 2, 3, maybe 4 times a night to urinate, you've probably already convinced yourself that something is wrong with your bladder, that it's weak, that it's overactive, that it's just aging. And look, I understand why you think that. It makes sense on the surface. You feel the urge, you get up, you go. The bladder seems like the obvious culprit. But here's what I've learned after more than 30 years of treating older adults, and I mean really listening to them, sitting with them, watching patterns over decades. The bladder is often the messenger, not the problem. Let me say that again, because it's important. In a remarkable number of people over 60, the bladder is simply doing its job. It's responding to a signal. The question nobody asks often enough is, where is that signal actually coming from? And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Because I've seen this story play out hundreds of times. A patient comes in, frustrated, exhausted, sometimes embarrassed. They tell me they're waking up constantly at night. They've been told they have an overactive bladder, maybe given a medication, maybe told to just accept it as part of getting older. But when we really look, when we dig a little deeper, we find something else entirely. We find swelling in the legs that nobody connected to the nighttime urination. We find daily habits, salt intake, fluid patterns that are quietly driving the whole thing. We find a circulatory issue masquerading as a bladder problem. And once we address that not with new medications, but with simple adjustments, many of these patients start sleeping through the night again. Or at least they're only getting up once instead of 4 times. So stay with me, because what I'm about to explain isn't complicated. It's just overlooked. And I think you deserve to understand what's actually happening in your body. Let me tell you about a patient I'll call Margaret. She was 67 when I first saw her, retired schoolteacher, generally healthy. Her main complaint was that she couldn't sleep anymore. She was getting up 3 or 4 times every night to urinate, and it was destroying her quality of life. She'd already seen a urologist. She'd been given a diagnosis of overactive bladder and prescribed a medication, one of those anticholinergics that are supposed to calm the bladder down. And it helped a little, maybe reduce things by 1 trip per night, but she was still exhausted, still frustrated, and now she was dealing with dry mouth and constipation from the medication. When I examined her, I noticed something that nobody had really addressed. Her ankles were swollen, not dramatically, not the kind of swelling that would alarm you, but there was definitely pitting edema. When I pressed on her shin, my finger left an indentation that took several seconds to fill back in. I asked her about it. She said, "Oh, that's been happening for years. It's worse in the summer. My doctor said it's just from sitting too much." And here's where things get interesting. Because that swelling, that fluid accumulating in her legs during the day, was directly connected to why she was waking up at night. Let me explain the physiology here, and I'll try to keep it as clear as possible. When you're upright during the day, standing, sitting, going about your life, gravity is constantly pulling fluid downward. This is normal. Your circulatory system is designed to handle it. Your heart pumps blood down to your legs, and then your veins and muscles work together to push that blood back up. But here's the thing. As we age, several factors start to work against this system. First, our veins become less efficient. The little valves inside them that prevent backflow don't work as well as they used to. Blood pools a bit more. Fluid leaks out of the capillaries into the surrounding tissue. Second, we often become less active. We sit more, we move less, and the muscles in our calves, which act as a pump to push blood back up toward the heart, don't get used as much. So, fluid accumulates. Third, and this is a big one, many of us are consuming far more sodium than we realize. And sodium holds onto water. Your body retains fluid when your salt intake is high, and that fluid has to go somewhere during the day. It often ends up in your legs. Now, here's the key insight. When you lie down at night, gravity is no longer pushing fluid into your legs. Instead, all that accumulated fluid starts to redistribute. It moves from your lower extremities back into your central circulation. Your blood volume effectively increases. Your kidneys detect this increase and think, "We have too much fluid, let's get rid of some." And so they do. They produce more urine. You wake up. You have to go. You go back to sleep. The process continues. You wake up again. This isn't your bladder malfunctioning. This isn't overactive bladder in the traditional sense. This is your body doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's just doing it at the wrong time because of fluid that accumulated during the day. I want to be careful here because I'm not saying this is the explanation for everyone. There are genuine bladder issues. There are prostate problems in men. There are neurological conditions that affect bladder function. These things exist and they matter. But what I am saying is that in my experience, and I've been doing this a long time, this fluid redistribution mechanism is far, far more common than most people realize, and it's chronically under-recognized. Part of the problem is how our medical system works. You go to a urologist for bladder problems. You go to a cardiologist for heart problems. You go to a primary care doctor for general things. But this particular issue falls between the cracks. It's not really a bladder disease. It's not really heart failure. It's a functional problem, a systems problem that requires someone to step back and look at the whole picture. And in a 10-minute appointment, that's hard to do. Let me tell you about another patient. I'll call him Robert. 72 years old, retired engineer, very methodical about his health. He came to me because he'd been told he had benign prostatic hyperplasia, an enlarged prostate, and had been started on medication for it. But the nighttime urination wasn't getting better. Now, he did have some prostate enlargement. That was real. But when I asked him about his daily routine, some things stood out. He spent most of his day sitting at his computer, working on woodworking plans and projects. He'd have a big dinner around 6 o'clock, often something his wife made, traditional Southern cooking, which he loved. Then he'd watch television until about 10, have a glass of iced tea, and go to bed. When I examined him, same story. Mild to moderate leg swelling by the end of the day. Not severe, not painful, but present. I asked about the dinner. What kinds of foods? Fried chicken, biscuits, gravy, green beans cooked with ham, mashed potatoes with butter and salt. I'm not criticizing that food. It's delicious, and it's part of his culture, but it's also extremely high in sodium. And he was eating it in the evening, a few hours before bed, at the exact time when his body was about to lie down and redistribute all that salt-retained fluid. We made some changes, not dramatic ones. I didn't tell him to stop eating his wife's cooking that would have been cruel and probably ineffective anyway, but we shifted some things around. He started eating his larger, saltier meal at lunch instead of dinner. In the evening, he'd have something lighter. He began elevating his legs for 30 to 40 minutes in the late afternoon, just putting them up on the couch while he read or watched something. And he cut back on fluids after about 6 o'clock, not severely, just moderately. Within 2 weeks, he was down from 4 nighttime trips to 1, sometimes none. His prostate hadn't changed. His bladder hadn't changed. What changed was the fluid dynamics, the timing and distribution of water and salt in his body. Now, I want to talk about sodium specifically, because I think it's one of the most underappreciated factors in all of this. Most people, when they think about reducing salt, think about not using the salt shaker, and that's fine, that helps a little. But the real issue is processed and prepared foods. The sodium in restaurant meals, in canned goods, in deli meats, in bread, in condiments, in frozen dinners. A single restaurant meal can contain 2,000 milligrams of sodium or more. That's almost an entire day's worth for a healthy adult, and it's definitely too much for someone with fluid retention issues. And here's the thing, you don't always taste it. Sodium is hidden in foods that don't even seem salty. Bread, breakfast cereals, cottage cheese, tomato sauce from a jar. I had a patient once who was doing everything right, or so she thought. She'd stopped adding salt to her food. She was eating what she considered a healthy diet, but her legs were still swelling, and she was still up 3 times a night. When we really went through her diet in detail, we found it. She was having a bowl of canned soup for lunch almost every day. Low-fat, heart-healthy soup, according to the label. But when we looked at the sodium content, it was over 800 milligrams per serving, and she was eating 2 servings. That's 1,600 milligrams of sodium in one meal, hidden in something she thought was good for her. The other piece of this that doesn't get talked about enough is the timing of leg elevation. When I tell patients to elevate their legs, they often say, "Oh, I already do that." But when I ask when they do it, they say, "At night, in bed." And that's too late. By the time you're in bed, the fluid is already going to mobilize no matter what position you're in. The goal is to mobilize it earlier in the late afternoon or early evening so that you urinate that fluid out before you go to sleep, not during sleep. So what I recommend is this. Sometime in the late afternoon, maybe around 4 or 5 o'clock, find a comfortable spot where you can recline with your legs elevated above the level of your heart. Not just feet up on an ottoman really elevated, lying on the couch with your feet on the armrest, lying in bed with pillows under your legs. Do this for 30 to 45 minutes. You'll probably find that you need to urinate afterward, and that's the point. Better to urinate at 6 o'clock in the evening than at 2 o'clock in the morning. This simple change, done consistently, can make a remarkable difference, and it costs nothing. It requires no medication. It's just working with your body's physiology instead of against it. Let me talk about walking and movement for a moment, because this connects to the muscle pump I mentioned earlier. Your calf muscles are incredibly important for venous return, for pushing blood back up from your legs toward your heart. Every time you walk, every time you flex your ankles, every time you go upstairs, those muscles squeeze the veins and push fluid upward. But if you're sedentary for most of the day, sitting at a desk, sitting in a car, sitting watching television, that pump doesn't activate, fluid accumulates. I'm not saying you need to run marathons. I'm saying that periodic movement throughout the day, even just standing up and walking around the room every hour, can make a meaningful difference. A short walk after lunch, a few minutes of gentle ankle circles while sitting, these small actions add up. One of my patients, a woman in her early 70s, started doing what she called commercial walks. Every time a commercial came on television, she'd get up and walk around her house until it was over. That's maybe 2 or 3 minutes of walking, several times an evening. Nothing strenuous, nothing complicated. But it was enough to keep her calf muscles engaged, to keep fluid moving, to reduce the accumulation that was causing her nighttime problems. I want to address something else that I hear from patients all the time. They say, "Well, I'll just stop drinking water in the afternoon." And I understand the logic. Less fluid in, less fluid out, right? But it's not quite that simple. Dehydration carries its own risks. Kidney stress, constipation, confusion in older adults, increased fall risk. I don't want you to stop drinking fluids. I want you to time them better. For most people, it makes sense to do the majority of your fluid intake in the morning and early afternoon. Have your coffee, have your tea, have your water with lunch. Then taper off in the evening, not stopping entirely, but slowing down. And pay attention to what you're drinking. Alcohol is a diuretic. It makes you produce more urine. Caffeine is also a diuretic. If you're having a glass of wine or a cup of coffee after dinner, that's working against you. A small glass of water if you're thirsty is fine. But large volumes of fluid in the 2 hours before bed are going to contribute to nighttime urination, regardless of what else you do. Now, I want to talk about what to do if you suspect this applies to you. First, look at your legs. At the end of the day, before you go to bed, press on your shin for about 5 seconds and release. Does your finger leave an indentation? Does that indentation take a while to fill back in? If so, you have pitting edema, and you likely have some degree of fluid retention. Second, think about your salt intake honestly. Not just whether you use the salt shaker, but what prepared and processed foods you're eating. Read some labels. You might be surprised. Third, consider your daily activity pattern. Are you moving throughout the day, or are you mostly sedentary? Are you giving your leg muscles a chance to pump fluid back upward? Fourth, and I think this is important, have a conversation with your doctor about this, not to challenge them, but to add to the picture. You might say, I've noticed my legs swell during the day. I'm wondering if that might be connected to waking up at night. What do you think? A good doctor will consider it. They might check your kidney function, your heart function, make sure nothing else is going on, and that's appropriate. This isn't about avoiding medical care, it's about getting the right diagnosis. I should say something about medications here, because I know some of you are on diuretics, water pills, for blood pressure or heart conditions. If you're on a diuretic and you're having nighttime urination issues, talk to your doctor about the timing of your medication. Many people take their diuretic first thing in the morning, and that's usually best. But if you're taking it later in the day, it might be contributing to the problem. And if you're on one of those overactive bladder medications and you're still having symptoms, it might be worth discussing whether the original diagnosis was correct. These medications work for true overactive bladder, but they won't do much if the problem is really fluid redistribution. And they come with side effects: dry mouth, constipation, cognitive effects in older adults that you want to avoid if you don't actually need them. I'm not telling you to stop any medication. That's a conversation to have with whoever prescribed it. But I am saying that it's worth questioning, worth revisiting, if the treatment isn't working. Let me bring this back to something fundamental. Sleep matters. It matters enormously, and not just for comfort, for health, for cognition, for mood, for immune function, for everything. When you're waking up multiple times a night, your sleep architecture is disrupted. You're not getting the deep, restorative sleep that your brain and body need. Over time, this contributes to memory problems, to depression, to increased fall risk, to a whole cascade of issues. So this isn't just about convenience. It's about protecting your health, your function, your independence as you age. And the tragedy is that so many people accept it. They assume this is just what getting older means. They stop traveling because they're embarrassed. They stop sleeping in the same bed as their spouse because they don't want to disturb them. They stop living fully because of something that, in many cases, could be significantly improved. I'll tell you one more story, and then I'll wrap up. I had a patient named Helen, 81 years old, sharp as a tack, lived alone, fiercely independent. She came to see me because she'd fallen at night and broken her wrist. She'd been getting up to urinate and tripped in the dark. When I took her history, the pattern was clear: significant leg swelling during the day, nighttime urination 4 to 5 times, high salt intake. She loved pickles and olives and deli sandwiches. Very sedentary during the day because her arthritis made walking painful. We worked on it together. We adjusted her diet, not dramatically, but meaningfully. We got her a small pedal exerciser that she could use while sitting in her chair, just gentle movements to activate her leg muscles. We established an afternoon leg elevation routine, and we talked about why this mattered, not just for convenience, but for safety, for independence, for staying in her own home. Over the next several months, her nighttime trips dropped from 4 or 5 to usually 1, sometimes 2. Her leg swelling improved. She slept better. She felt more energetic during the day. She told me, with characteristic bluntness, "Why didn't anyone explain this to me 20 years ago?" And I didn't have a good answer for her, except that we often treat symptoms instead of understanding systems. We give medications instead of explanations. We address the complaint without asking why it's happening. So here's what I want you to take away from this conversation. If you're waking up multiple times at night to urinate, and especially if you're over 60, don't just accept it. And don't assume your bladder is the problem without exploring other explanations. Look at your legs. Look at your salt intake. Look at your activity pattern. Look at the timing of your fluids. Try elevating your legs in the late afternoon. Try cutting back on sodium, especially in the evening. Try incorporating gentle movement throughout your day. See what happens. These are not complicated interventions. They're not expensive. They don't require prescriptions or appointments. They're simply about understanding how your body works and working with it. And if you've tried these things and you're still having problems, then absolutely pursue a thorough medical evaluation. Rule out other causes. Work with your doctors, but start with the simple things, because often the simple things help. I've been practicing medicine for over 30 years now, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the body usually makes sense. Symptoms that seem random or frustrating usually have a logic to them if you look carefully enough. Nighttime urination in older adults often has a logic. Fluid accumulates in the legs during the day. Fluid redistributes when you lie down. Kidneys respond to the increased volume by making urine. You wake up. It's not mysterious. It's not a disease. It's physiology. And once you understand it, you can start to do something about it. I'd love to hear from you, if you're willing to share. How many times are you getting up at night? Have you noticed swelling in your legs? Have any doctors ever connected these two things for you? Because I suspect for many of you, this is the first time anyone has explained it quite this way. And that's a shame, but it's also an opportunity to take back your sleep, to protect your health, to age with more comfort and dignity. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourselves and get some rest.